So apologies before I get started, because at the risk of being a little bit predictable, well, what's my sermon going to be about? Yeah, well, for those of you who know me, you know my personal interests. You know that I have a car with a license plate boasting that I am a Tigers fan for life. I often live my entire lifetime in the shadow of something my father taught me, words that he taught me over and over again, that the game of baseball can teach you everything that you need to know in life. And I know I talk about baseball from the podium a lot, but this summer gave me an experience, an example that was just really too hard to pass up. Because as you will soon see, sometimes the truth is actually stranger than fiction and a perfect setup for a sermon. So, after moving my oldest into her new apartment in Chicago, we celebrated with a Cubs game at Wrigley Field. At one point, I looked up, and the pitcher for the visiting St. Louis Cardinals was a young and rising star named Genesis Cabrera. As a rabbi, I was intrigued by his name. I didn't think, though, much more about it until the next batter stepped up to the plate, and the announcer at Wrigley Field bellowed, "Batting for the Cubs, the right fielder, Patrick Wisdom." So immediately I took out my phone and I wrote a note to myself, "Genesis is pitching to wisdom." And a sermon is born. And actually, that experience brought me back to one of my favorite lessons from rabbinic school. So apologies, because I might get a bit textual tonight, which is difficult without screens to show you, but I hope you'll understand something that I learned from the book of Proverbs, which is a collection of teachings from King Solomon. For the most part, it is a collection of life lessons that actually still often apply in the modern world. If there is a key verse, though, that unlocks the power of Proverbs, it's found in the very first chapter, Reshit Chochmah Yirat Adonai. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. In other words, if we just fear God a little bit, you are no fool. Now that theme becomes a controversial conversation through rabbinic literature. The sages love to connect between wisdom and the fear of God, and they play with the text beautifully. In the words of one of my professors, Steve Kaufman, who, by the way, sang at Woodstock with a group called Shana Na and was replaced by a guy named Bowser before he went on to become a Bible scholar. That is a true story. My Bible professor preceded Bowser in Shana Na. In any case, he writes in one of his very famous books that the book of Proverbs personifies wisdom and gives it a voice. According to Proverbs, wisdom claims that she was present at the time of creation, that she was the master workman at God's side. And in chapter 8, these are the words of wisdom. The Lord possessed me at the beginning, from the earliest times of earth. So wisdom says that somehow she was present with God before the depths existed, before the mountains, before the earth, before the waters above, the waters below, before the heavens. And later, at the end of the book of Proverbs, wisdom goes on to say, I was beside God as a master workman. I daily was God's delight, rejoicing with God in creation. So Jewish scholars play on all of that Hebrew that connects wisdom and the work of creation in Genesis. So it's not just a baseball game that connects Genesis to wisdom. Listen, in Genesis 1:1, the opening book of the Torah, it says, in the beginning, Reshit, God created heaven and earth. So we know that Bereshit, that word, connects to God and doing the work of creation. And then in Psalms, a play on the text I've already read, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of Reshit, or the beginning of wisdom, Reshit, wisdom. And then the Lord possessed me, wisdom, at the beginning of the way, before the works that God started. That's from Proverbs. So Jewish has established clearly this connection between Genesis and wisdom and the work of creation that God did so many years ago. But what is the meaning for us today as we enter the high holiday season? Well, I was recently in Scotland doing a bar mitzvah for a grandchild of a Temple Israel member, and I came across this quote on the side of a church attributed to a Scottish reverend named Oswald Chambers. I couldn't pass it up. The remarkable thing about fearing God is that when you fear God, you fear nothing else. Whereas if you do not fear God, you fear everything else. So a little God-fearing may just be good for us, especially in this high holiday season. But what does it actually mean to fear God? Well, tomorrow night at Slichot, we will observe the first echoes of the high holidays, and we will begin to feel the energy change around us. And here at Temple Israel, we usually shy away from the literal translation of Unatana Tokef and Barosh Hashanah. But for the purposes of making my point, let me share what the text actually says. Let us declare the sacred power of this day. On Rosh Hashanah it is written, on Yom Kippur it is sealed. How many shall live and how many shall die? Who shall see old age and who shall not? Who will perish by water and who by fire? Who by sword and who by beast? Who by famine and who by thirst? Who by earthquake and who by plague? It's terrible, right? What a terrible God-fearing thought that God could do all of that to us. But then the Nechemta comes. Repentance, prayer, and righteousness, charity, avert the severity of that decree. You see, the very essence of the high holidays is just a little small dose of fearing God. And maybe that's the point. A little fear leads to a little more attention to doing what is right. A little fear may help us to understand that we should do what is right and kind and nice and fair and good. And there you have it. Genesis is pitching to wisdom, and wisdom is the fear of God. So we all needed a little bit of that reminder as we enter a new year. May we all find wisdom, may we all have new beginnings, and may we all fear God just a little bit to do the right thing in this world. May it be for all of us a healthy and prosperous new year. Shabbat Shalom.